Welcome to Famous People You've Never Heard Of, the podcast brought to you by Bluefire Theatre Company. Each week, Lottie, Linda or Steve will guide you through the centuries to shine the spotlight once again on entertainers the world has forgotten. Thank you so much for joining us as we chat to our fabulous guests and find out more about these forgotten superstars of history. If you enjoy the podcast, do please rate, review and most importantly, subscribe so that you never miss an episode and more people find out about us. And now, let us delay no longer in introducing you to a famous person you've never heard of.
Sadly, Vesta Tilley's name is no longer as well known as we think it should be. So we've gathered together some people with different types of interest in the girl from Worcester, who became Burlington Bertie on stage and Lady de Vries off stage, to reveal exactly how much of a phenomenon she was. First, we hear from Chris Jaeger, director of the Worcester Festival and Vesta Tilley expert. And then our Lottie has a chat with Ann-Lindsey Wickens, who has appeared as Vesta Tilley on stage several times, about what it is like to get under the skin of such an iconic figure.
My name's Chris Jaeger. I'm a resident of Worcester. Many years ago, I wrote a play about Vesta Tilley called Vesta, funnily enough, and that has now performed over 50 times around the country in theatres. And for many years, I was chairman of the Vesta Tilley Society. Vesta Tilley was a remarkable woman, and she was born in Worcester. There is a blue plaque, not on her actual house, which doesn't exist anymore, but on the nearest house to where her house stood. And there are several buildings in Worcester dedicated to her. One of them is her halls of residence at the university, and there is a hall in Lowesmoor which is named after her. She wasn't great at staying in touch with Worcester. She wasn't really a family person. She started touring at the age of 3, unbelievably, and with her father, who she idolised. Once she went on tour, she virtually never came back. She obviously wasn't close to her mother. When she wrote her autobiography, in 282 pages, she only mentions her mother, Matilda, once, which is, I think, quite remarkable. And once she'd left Worcester, she really only came back once to open a conservative fete in her middle age, but she wasn't close to Worcester, that's for sure. What is for sure is what an amazing woman she was. Once she had made a decision at about the age of 11 that she would dress as a man. She never ever performed on stage as a woman, and she got away with a lot of material and stuff which a man wouldn't have got away with, because she used to send up all the stereotypes of men, and they loved it. Whereas I think they would have been offended had it been a man. She was the second child of 13, so I suppose it's not surprising that her family was not something that she felt she could be close to. She never went to school for a day. She was self-educated through the theatre and through meeting people, but a very, very intelligent woman. She was, for 30 years probably, the highest earning woman in Great Britain. That's incredible. And she used to make, at a time when the average man's wage was £1 a week, she was earning 11 or 12 pounds a week as a 10-year-old, which is terrific. She tried film a couple of times, absolutely hated it, never went back to it. She believed that performance was about live work, and she hated the repetition of films. Later in life, her husband was knighted for his efforts in the First World War, which indeed she helped with. She used to recruit from the stage sometimes, and she would have a recruiting sergeant. She would appeal to men. She would sing songs about how wonderful it was to be a soldier, and then they would sign them up. And at one particular occasion in the Hackney Empire, she signed up 300 men that became the Vesta Tilley platoon. As I said, her husband was knighted, and she became Lady de Vries. She was incredibly loved by the people who came to see her. And when she retired in 1920, theatres all over the country had leather-bound books that people could sign at her last performance to say goodbye. It was called The People's Tribute to Vesta Tilley, and there were over 2 million signatures, a staggering figure in 1920. So she was probably the greatest music hall star that's ever been produced in this country, and she was certainly the most wealthy. She came from a very, very poor and normal background, and her incredible talent made her the superstar that she was. So that was Vesta Tilley.
So, welcome to today's podcast to Ann-Lindsey Wickens, who has been playing Vesta Tilley for some time, I believe. Hello, Anne.
Hello.
Tell us a little bit about you and why you like the idea of playing Vesta.
I love the idea of playing Vesta. We have myself and Marie Kelly, Marie Kelly plays Maury Lloyd. We have a company called Catapult Productions. We wanted to put on a two-hander. We'd seen the play Betty and Joan and thought it'd be nice to find two ladies in history who worked well together and sparked off each other, who were very, very different, polar opposites, for a bit of tension. We went through several. After much research, we thought Vesta Tilley and Maury Lloyd. They were around at about the same time and very different types of performers. So that's why we hit upon that. I chose Vesta Tilley, having played Vesta Tilley many years before, and Marie would like to play Maury Lloyd, and that's how we divided it. We decided Michael Thomas wrote the play for us, and we took it from there. We really enjoyed the research. I was fascinated by her autobiography. It was really fascinating, taking a step back in time. She was such an interesting person to play because although she was always known for playing a boy and then a man, but she was in fact very feminine. She said her female vanity would not let her cut her long blonde locks, which were actually very curly. She spent many, many hours pushing her hair into a short wig, because she wanted to look very, very boyish. So there were so many things about her. She lived to be 88. She had a very, very full life. She retired from performing and supported her husband, who was a politician. So she had a very, very busy life and in many directions. I just thought she was a fascinating person to play.
And it's really interesting that you say about all the long blonde curls, because didn't she used to wear men's underwear as well to make sure
Apparently she did, so she'd feel much more masculine. I suppose in fact that would in fact happen, wouldn't it? You would actually feel very, very much more masculine if you're wearing men's underwear.
I suppose it would make you walk differently, wouldn't it?
It certainly would. Yes, it certainly would.
Yeah. And do you do the songs and everything as well?
Yes, absolutely. The songs. And we found Burlington Bertie we found the original. Burlington Bertie from Bow was a later version for Ella Shields. So we found the original Burlington Bertie. And we had quite a bit of interest when we were playing the show because people would say, but that's not Burlington Bertie. We said, yes, it is Burlington Bertie. The next piece, because they couldn't actually use the same song, they did, because it was copywritten, they wrote Burlington Bertie from Bow, whereas Burlington Bertie is a very upper class gentleman. A Burlington Bertie from Bow is the opposite. So people are often surprised at that. And it was quite difficult to get hold of the original notes for that because that's not around very much.
Well, it's not one that you hear very often because everybody knows Burlington Bertie from Bow because everyone's done that, haven't they? It's
They have.
the good old days. That was the one big music hall song everyone
It
used to
was.
do.
I performed it I think my first time when I was 15 in my school dancing show.
Oh, did you?
So yeah, my grandmother actually bought me a suit for that, and I still have the same suit now.
So you have a penchant for the pants and the hat and cane early on.
Always happy in the tail suit.
It's such an elegant look, isn't it?
It is an elegant look. It is an elegant look. I think in a man in a dress suit looks really lovely.
Is there sort of something in particular about Vesta's life that you were interested in? I know you've read the autobiography.
When we first started performing the show, my favourite scene was her proposal from her husband, Walter, because she was not going to give in. He was so insistent, and she teased him mercilessly. When they first met, she wasn't keen at all. His father was an impresario, a theatre man, and he wanted to go into that line of work as well. And she would take the mickey out of him, saying, I hate those boys that sit at the front of the stage and throw flowers. What a waste of time. So she would not give in. He was very shy, very timid, asked her father if he could take her to a ball, and he said, oh, yes, you can. And apparently the first ball they went to together, she spent her whole time dancing with other men. He was very, very upset. And she gradually warmed towards him, but she did tease him mercilessly for quite a long time. And I think she had a twinkle in her eye. She could be really, really funny. That aspect of her I like very much. She was steely, very, very strong-minded, very driven, very career-orientated. But yeah, she had a sense of fun in her, most definitely.
And she was kind of the one of all the music hall turns who really sort of made it financially, didn't she? And moved into the upper echelons of society.
She did. I think she was the best paid female performer at any point. Something like £600 a week, which was phenomenal then.
It's a lot of money then, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. And I think she was quite happy to become Lady de Vries. I think that was a crowning glory. I think she didn't want to give up. She loved her performance, but she gave up at, I think, about 52. And, she moved on to a new phase of her life and lived 36 more years. So she had a very, very full second part of her life as well. And she did enjoy that socialising.
And that second part of her life, is that when she did all her charity work and was very much
Most
Lady
definitely.
de Vries? Because he was an MP, wasn't he?
He was an MP, yeah. First of all, he was in the Liverpool area, even moving to places like all over. He moved about, but basically the Liverpool area to start with. And she would go to the door. He was a Conservative MP. And she would go into working class homes and say, well, here's my husband. They'd say, oh, Vesta. They'd invite her in, and quite often they'd end up voting for her husband. So she did quite a bit of political playing, really, because everybody knew Vesta Tilley. And they think, well, if he's married to her, if she likes him, he can't be a bad man.
Because we love her.
Yeah. And I think the same as when they were trying to get people to enlist for the First World War. Between Walter and Vesta, they got many, many men to sign up. But there was actually a platoon called Vesta Tilley's platoon that they signed up once on one particular day. So she was a very persuasive lady.
And she did the recruiting songs, didn't she?
She did. She did a lot of recruiting songs. Yes, she did. Several. And I think she was happy to get into khaki. And she did persuade a lot of people to sign up. I would imagine there were quite a few mothers or girlfriends and wives who were quite devastated when their loved ones didn't come home. But she did what the country was expecting them to do at the time.
I love the fact that I think you said he started in the Liverpool area, and I think he was MP for Blackpool, wasn't he, Walter?
Yes, he was, yes.
And the fact that he was MP in Blackpool and they ended up living in Monte Carlo.
Yes.
The two entertainment capitals of the world.
Yes, that's so
Just
true.
Slightly different climate.
Very different climate. Very, very different climate. But I think as performers, we are adaptable. I think she would have been very adaptable. No, I think she probably gave him that working class feel, which is what helped him with his work. Mm-hmm. But also, she wasn't really living the working class life. But she could, because of her performance, we can adapt as performers, can't we?
And that reminds me of that famous saying about Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. He gave her class and she gave him sex.
Yes. That's so true. Yes, that is so true.
The perfect team. So and pretty much the same on a different level with.
Oh, very much so. And I think couples can work very much like that, can't they? We knew that one gives one side, one gives the other.
And do you think that Vesta would have taken the same path if she were alive today? Do you think she would still have been on board?
She'd be on television every day. She'd be a media sensation. She would be doing talk shows, chat shows, quiz shows. She would definitely constantly be working because she was very driven, very driven.
So would you see her in as one of the loose women or something like that?
She probably would be a guest, but not a regular.
Right.
She'd be on things like QI, and she would definitely be around, probably even social media. She would definitely be out there. She'd be doing television, she'd be doing film, doing theatre, whatever she could turn her hand at.
And she was a very bright lady, wasn't she? She was.
She was.
You know, very
clever, which is interesting considering she couldn't have had very much schooling, because I'm guessing she would have been touring around when she was working from the age of 3. So I'm assuming she was partly home educated, very much attention to detail.
As proven by the men's undies.
Absolutely, yes. Exactly, yes.
I must stop talking about the men's undies.
We mustn't talk about men's underwear anymore. Perish the thought.
When you're playing her, do you sort of take her home a bit with you? Is there something of you in her and her in you, do you think?
I think there is, definitely. I think we can all, as performers and actors, we can always adapt into someone else's way of thinking. And I think studying her background did help in that. I started quite early in life as a performer, but you think, yes, I can understand how she feels. I don't think I'm similar to her in many ways. She could be very, very cutting and very abrasive. And she was very, very driven, which I admire. And I think that part of her I like to take on board and think, I can be like this, very determined, very positive, very confident. So I think it's very nice to look at somebody else's attitude and think, yes, perhaps I could use that attitude.
We can learn from these people, can't we?
We can. When you think how successful she was in those days as a woman, that's phenomenal.
Did she make any movies?
No, there was a film about her called After the Ball, which was afterwards. I did see 1 or 2 little cine clips, but nothing particular. She did do pantomime. She was quite often principal boy in pantomime. She loved doing panto. She was apparently a very good principal boy. And the singing voice was... I've only heard, again, recordings of her as she was elderly, and it's very difficult to tell what her voice was like when she was younger, but it was a good, clear voice.
And pretty strong, I should imagine, because...
Very much so.
In those good old days, there were no microphones and big sound systems, were there?
They were travelling from theatre to theatre in the open air at night and going to tour again. So she must have had quite a strong voice, yes.
Yeah. Must have made her quite a formidable person in her later years as well.
I think so, very much. People would be a little bit in awe of her. Oh. She was a very larger-than-life character anyway. I think she had a circle of friends, but perhaps it wouldn't have been so easy to know her if you weren't inside that circle of friends. In fact, she did come back to stay with a good friend when she died. She was left Monte Carlo to come back to London for a while. That's when she was staying with a friend, and that's when she died in London. And
she's buried in London, isn't she?
She is, yes, she is. Although she didn't come from London, it's nice that she's back in the UK.
Yes.
It would feel the right thing to do. It just feels right, doesn't it?
It does. She's back home, kind of.
Oh, absolutely. She's back in her resting place, as it were.
And I know, obviously, we're not terribly sure of what's happening in the near to mid future. Do you have plans to take her back out on the road?
We do indeed. We're hoping to do a 2-hander, but it's a 3-hander, including an MD, which will be a little bit easier to tour than it was as a 7-piece. Taking it back out as Vesta Amari.
Oh, that's nice.
We're hoping to do that again, as soon as we can actually get the whole booking system going, hopefully from the summer onwards.
Well, thank you so much. It's been so nice to chat to you today and actually get a proper insight into what might have made Vesta work. So good luck with the tour. Let's hope that we're out there sooner rather than later.
Thank you very much indeed. It's been a pleasure.
To celebrate International Women's Day in 2020, the composer Jessica Dannheiser created an album entitled Orchestral Portraits. For her subjects, she had to select 7 individuals from the 100 pioneering women featured in the National Portrait Gallery's book of the same name. She chose Malala Yousafzai, Amy Johnson, Vera Brittain, Lee Miller, Jocelyn Bell Burnell, Doreen Lawrence and Vesta Tilley. We're very grateful to Jessica for some of the music in this episode, and we've given her the last word today to tell us why she made that final choice on the list.
I chose Vesta Tilley because I was basing the tracks on this album each on a portrait from a book published by the National Portrait Gallery of 100 pioneering women. And I was just really drawn to her portrait. It was a photograph of her bike, dressed as a man, looking very cheeky, kind of looking to one side. And the image just captured my imagination. I didn't really know much about her. And as I read more, I discovered how successful she was, what an incredible performer she was. Back at the time when it wasn't that common for women to be so successful and financially independent. And I thought she had such a sense of humour and such a sense of joy in her work that it would make for a very fun, upbeat, entertaining, musical, orchestral portrait. And that was in contrast to some of the other portraits that I had chosen, which were slightly more reflective or more romantic or darker. Hers was just one of joy and playfulness. So that's why I chose her.
Thank you for listening to Famous People You've Never Heard Of. If you've enjoyed this week's podcast and would like to find out more, do take a look at the show notes where you'll find further information and reading material, as well as a transcription of today's episode. If you like what we do and would like to support our work, please check out our Patreon page, which can be found at patreon.com/bluefiretheatre. Or, if you prefer to keep us going with a caffeine fix, you can do so at ko-fi.com. That's ko-fi.com/bluefiretheatre. We really appreciate any support you can give to help keep the show on the road. And we'd also love it if you give the show a rate and a review. It really helps us to remain visible out there. And don't forget, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, where we'd love to see you.